Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Sam Metcalf. I'm the Midlands editor of thebusinessdesk.com, and welcome to this next In the Circle session called Creating a Sustainable Supply Chain. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll be taking a close look at how businesses can take a lead by either encouraging or requiring improvement in their supply chains. We'll also take a look at how technology and collaborations are helping to deliver significant progress for retailers. This is a subject, of course, which has been in the news seemingly constantly over recent times. So it's lucky today we've got an expert panel to guide us through. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves in a second, but before we do that, we really want to hear your views and questions. If you, to the right of your screen there, there's a chat function. If you have any questions for any member of the panel, please type them in there, and we'll do our best to come to you and get your query answered. Okay, it's time to meet our panel now. So I'm going to just ask them to tell me who they are, where they come from, and briefly what they do. So I'm going to start with you, Rosie.
Oh, thanks, Sam. Hello, everybody. So I'm Rosie. I'm the head of sustainability at Boohoo Group. I joined in August last year, but I've been in retail for around about 10 years. So I'm in it. For those of you who don't know much about Boohoo, we're based in Manchester, but we've also got offices in London and around the world. And we've now got 13 brands. So we're still quite young, but we've grown massively. We've got 13 brands. So the traditional ones that you'll know about, which are like Boohoo and Pretty Little Thing. But then over the past year, we've also acquired the likes of Karen Millen, Coast Oasis Warehouse, Debenhams.com, Wallis, etc. So we're really growing, and it means we've got kind of a really broad customer base and a really broad range of price points in terms of clothes as well. We're purely online. And over the last year, we've done a lot, and I can tell you a little bit more about this later, but we've kind of built a new group function, which is where I sit, which is looking at responsible sourcing and product operations. So kind of really relevant for this session today. So looking forward to talking to you all.
Thanks, Rosie. And
hi, good afternoon. My name's Simon Payne. I'm a co-founder of soulresponsibility.co.uk. So we work with businesses like JD Sports, so we're a sustainable partner with them, and we sort of intervene where pretty much in the life cycle where there's a decision to be made of what to do with a product when it's damaged, what it's to do with when it's considerably out of date, etc. We then save this product from going to landfill. We resell it, and then in addition we work with quite a few charities in and around the areas of Manchester, Yorkshire, etc. And the products that we are unable to resell, we donate and work with homeless charities, etc. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
yeah, thanks, Simon. And finally, Helena.
Hello, everybody, and an amazing panel to be on today. So thank you for inviting me to be on this panel with these great people. So I'm from an organisation called Products for Change. We're a membership organisation that started in the brand and licensing industry. So we work with brand owners, manufacturers, creatives, retail, anybody in that whole supply chain to help build sustainable practices by working together to do that.
Thanks, panel. Okay, we're going to kick off the discussion then. I'm going to put this to you, Rosie, first. You mentioned that you've been working over the last year on a big project, haven't you? I know, because I've written about it and what you're doing in Leicester. But who drives initially? Who drives who or what drives the sustainability agenda within supply chains? Would you say?
So within the business, yeah. So I think no one person, I think, is the simplest answer. So we have got kind of now very strong governance processes in place around sustainability. And when I talk about sustainability, my remit is primarily focused on the environmental side. We do have a whole team looking at the labour standards piece as well, but we're all part of this broader sustainability and product operations team. But yeah, so from a governance point of view, we have a sustainability leadership team, and that includes our CEO, our CFO, our co-founders, and they're the ones that have kind of helped me in driving our sustainability strategy, which we published in March this year. Kind of alongside that, as I mentioned before, we've got 13 different brands across the group. So we also have what we call a supply chain compliance committee, which meets every 2 weeks, and they cover a whole host of things from product compliance to ethical trade to sustainability. And that includes the commercial directors from all of our different brands. And that's a great forum for us to kind of set our standards and set our targets, monitor progress, etc., and have kind of the difficult discussions that that have in this area. And then that filters down, so all of the teams have targets that they are working towards, whether it's buying into more sustainable materials, etc. And I guess my team's role then is to set policy, set the guidelines, set the standards, and support everybody around the business to try and embed it essentially, and try and innovate as well at the same time. So yeah, so hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Rosie. Simon and Helena, for a smaller business than Boohoo, how easy is it to pinpoint who should be coming up with these policies? So who would drive that in a smaller business, Simon?
I suppose for me personally, it'll be me. I mean, as a business, what we want to do is, we want to step in at that point of the supply chain where there is that decision where you come to the end of it and you're thinking, right, okay, what do we do with the product when it has got some damage, but there is still some life left in it, whether there be some form of markings on it, whether something that can be repaired on a garment, then that's for us, that's where we do a lot of our work. I mean, when we sort of work with JD as we do now, that's the kind of service that we provide to them, and it's giving them a solution to say, look, the garment can still be worn, and it can still be worn for the initial purpose that it was created for. I think obviously you split the supply chain into two different halves. You've got the first half of it, and then it's kind of divided by the consumer in the middle. And the first half is obviously where you look at the water consumption, making sure that the labour's sorted and everything else. And then after the consumer buys it, then you've got the different side of it there, the responsibility side of what happens from there.
And Helena, what do you hear from people who come to you?
Well, I think more than ever, I think actually what's happening within Who Takes Responsibility is that it's actually everybody's responsibility to understand the full life cycle of a product, how it's made and where it ends up, and like the guys have said. And we're even actually seeing that coming through with government legislation, with new legislation around packaging and producer responsibility. So actually what government's saying is if you produce something, you're actually responsible for the end of life of that product. And I think this is just the beginning of all of these. The UK government's beginning of a 5-year plan, the same with the European government. And so what we're doing within the brand and licensing industry is if you've got a brand owner like a Disney that's then licensed out somebody to make products using their brand that then goes to retail, actually that brand owner is responsible for how that product is made. As before you tick a box to say it's being made ethically, actually nobody's ticking that box to say it's being made with sustainable materials, or they're looking at their scope 3 or how they can reduce that, or the water usage. So actually what's now happening is the whole industry is saying everybody needs transparency of all of it, and we collectively need to figure out how we solve these issues. As before, it might have been one person within the team that's very insularly looking at something, if that's the right word. And I think actually moving forward, it's kind of a full team effort.
Thanks, Helena. So we've talked about the people. Then let's talk about the technology. Rosie and Simon, what technologies are driving change, and how easy and affordable are these to implement, for example, for SMEs? Rosie, you're on mute, Rosie.
Sorry, that was a great answer I was giving as well. So technology-wise, I guess it depends on what you're trying to do, because there's lots of different parts of sustainable supply chains. The first part, I think, is about kind of traceability and transparency of your supply chain. So for kind of big businesses like us, it is supplier management systems. having all of our different systems linked together. So whether that's the buying teams, the supplier portals, and all of that kind of stuff, they're not rocket science, but it's important to have them in place and have it all linked together. And there's lots of systems out there that kind of help you with that. And then I guess the second bit is the technology for the customer to see kind of where those products come from, and that's where it gets much more tricky. I think some brands have done that very well, and generally it's kind of brands that look after a small number of products and have quite a tight supply chain. They're able to do kind of things like QR codes saying this is where that product was made and stuff like that. For a retailer like ours, it gets more complex because we're selling so many different types of products and have a much bigger supply chain. But I think that's kind of where it's going, and something that I think customers are increasingly interested in. So does that answer the question slightly?
Absolutely, Rosie. Simon, what about you? What's the next big thing in tech?
It's probably a very hard one for me to answer from a technology perspective for us personally. I think across the board, I think what Rosie was saying is transparency. The transparency across the entire kind of process is going to be really, really important. And that is literally a cradle to grave solution. If you could somehow kind of put on a label what each item has, either your CO2 emissions, what it has specifically cost to get this item to the consumer, not financial costs, but environmental costs, then something like that will be really, really good, because we're only going to go one way, and we all know it. But I think what everyone needs to understand is it's a journey, and we've got the destination, but we don't know the path. And we don't know if it's going to be up and down all the time, left and right. We just don't know. We've all kind of got along this train and gone, right, let's make a difference. But something to give the consumer complete and utter visibility and say, right, as a business, you've got a pair of Addy, Nike, Pretty Little Thing, whatever it may be, and this is what your CO2 emissions are, this is what this is where it has been made, etc. I think for that, it's going to help give consumer confidence going forward. I think it's just the best way to be open and transparent from my perspective. So I suppose it might not be specifically a tech thing, but it's certainly an honesty thing, which across the board, fashion, retail, etc., just needs to sort of open up and be a lot more honest and say, this is actually what it is. We're not perfect, but this is what it is costing against the environment. And I think as soon as something that is done going forward, a lot of people will understand the journey that we're all going along.
Simon, Helen, is that something you agree with? Is honesty as important as technology?
Oh, totally. And I think when you look at over the last couple of years, just the amount of greenwashing that's been in the marketplace, I think at the minute there's actually a review that's happening within the European Union at the minute, because I think there's something like 450 different, if not more than that, stamps of sustainability, and the consumer doesn't necessarily know what that means. And it's very easy to hide behind that. And there's no regulation within that either. So transparency is really key. There's actually a new tech startup that saw some innovation last week called Brand Conscience, and they're doing exactly what you just said, Simon, where a bit like food standard labelling, where traffic light system. They've created a traffic light system for consumer goods. So hopefully it would be this standardised. So it's ex-Intel, it's with Oxford University and California State University. They've been given something like 3 UK innovation grants to build this technology, and it's there, and they built it in fashion first. And it's quite amazing how they're using clever tech to bring transparency to the consumer, and that is totally the future. There's a couple of other companies. I think there was one in the news this week with a food company that's looking to add sustainability metrics to their food standard labelling, but this would be for consumer goods. But yeah, so it's amazing to see all that come through. There's also some really clever tech happening in the back end of the supply chain that isn't consumer facing. When you're looking at even with the sampling of products, because there's so much waste in factory on sampling of products. So we know that Asda, for example, are using quite a lot of 3D design to reduce all of that sampling. And I know that, again, in a conference last week, Asda was saying that for one season alone across all of their products, the sampling wastage equates to a mid-terrace house of ice melted just because of the amount of carbon. So if that's just Asda in one season, can you imagine what that is globally across the whole flash? I mean, we're melting a lot of ice. So what they're looking at doing is actually what clever tech can we use in the back end of actually just how we produce before we even get to the front end of transparency. But there's some amazing stuff happening.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Sam, just on what Helena has said, it's not always the tech as well. A lot of it is how things have been done. So I think it's the tech is important, but like you say, with the processes and the sampling, and you'll have hundreds of lines of ranges of colorways of materials, of fittings and finishings, and that could be one line, and if you do that across the board, you've got so much sampling that, like you say, it's not that it's unnecessary waste, it's just that's always how it's been done. Because of always how it's been done, it might be a case of going, actually, let's just change the processes involved in this. Could we do sampling virtually? But then I suppose you lose your hand touch of the garments and everything. But there's always methods and ways that you can sort of change along the way. It's like we've all adapted to Zoom. We're all on the conference today, which is fantastic, and we're all sat in our offices and homes. But I think 2 or 3 years ago, we would have never thought it possible at all. We would have all driven down to the events. We would have all spent the morning in traffic and everything else, and then come back. But now we can do it, and we'd have never thought that. So I think probably process change is going to be important, hand in hand with the technology, because I don't think technology can change everything. People's perceptions and the methods of doing it probably need to change quite dramatically as well.
But we have
Sorry, Sam.
There's one more example, because I was just thinking, I used to work in food, and I think I think food's probably further ahead than a lot of other industries. So there's an organisation called Geeky, who basically you can download an app, you can scan the barcode, and it will basically bring up different badges associated with that product. So whether it's kind of a healthy product, or whether the company has really good palm oil standards, or whether the soy is responsibly sourced and stuff like that. So there's potentially a little bit more customer facing communications within food at the moment.
It's so fascinating. And actually, I know, Sam, you're asking about small businesses. So by moving to online approvals, there's one company in our network that saves 300 grand a year just by moving to online approvals, because they weren't shipping products from China, sending it out to somewhere else, it being the wrong colour, it being the wrong size, doing the same again. So actually, you get to do the right thing for the planet, but actually a small business can save a significant amount of money as well.
Great answers. Thanks, guys. So how do businesses then get more support if they want to decide they want to do all this? Is the supply chain always willing to, dive straight in, or if not, how do businesses get more buy-in and support from their supply chain? Simon.
Ooh, I always get the tricky ones first. How do they get more buy-in? Can I kind of pass that to Rosie, because from our
absolutely.
I'd like to sort of see from a Boohoo perspective how that would come across.
Yeah, so it's very, very relevant for me at the moment. So I think the key thing that we've been trying to do, and seems to be working, is by setting some clear targets on sustainability. So moving to more sustainable materials, having those targets in place. My team has been developing quite a lot of clear and consistent guidelines for our suppliers. So explaining the kind of certification process that we will need to evidence any more sustainable materials we're adopting. Training of our internal teams on the standards that we expect, and just making that kind of continually part of the conversation with suppliers, because essentially I guess what they're looking for is consistency. And then the other thing we've been doing is we've got kind of a range of different suppliers, some of which are very understand the kind of certification process and the compliance process we need to go through. Others are less clear on it. So we've done a lot of training of suppliers as well, to explain to them the standards, and kind of working with them on it essentially. So that's kind of very specifically on the kind of sustainable materials piece that I've been working on. I think more broadly, how businesses get buy-in. I think it's ensuring that whatever you're trying to do is relevant for your business. So sustainability is a huge topic area, and you can kind of be brought down millions of different rabbit holes if you're not careful. So what a lot of businesses do, and it sounds very technical, but it's not, like they carry out materiality assessments. So they look at kind of what business area am I in, what are the priority areas, where are my biggest areas of impact, and then what should I be doing to tackle it. So I think if and then linking it into kind of where the trends are, from like what customers are saying, what investors are saying, what legislation is out there. It's making the sustainability world kind of relevant to that business and prioritizing your actions in those areas, essentially.
Simon, did that help you?
It did. Apologies, Rosie, not meaning to pass it over. I was really interested from a Boohoo perspective how that side kind of came across. So from how we're obviously at the back end of the supply chain. So when we deal with retailers, we deal with a product that no one else can specifically deal with. So we try and stop the problem of it going to landfill, I suppose. But from the other perspective, it's how it is further, and probably at the other side of the supply chain from anything.
Helena, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, so I mean, only 2% of global factories are actually signed up to an ethical or sustainability initiative. 2%. So we've got a long way to go. So that kind of just shows you the scale of the amount of work that needs doing. Also, there's so many people that are involved in the supply chain that the money doesn't always end up at the factory base. Actually, the factory base tends to be the one that actually is the poorest. So, but it's actually the factory that's going to have the biggest impact on the positive change when it comes to sustainability. So it could be something as simple as there's a factory that you work with, we want them to use recycled PET, the yarn's a little bit different so it doesn't go through the needles in their machines. So all they need is a new needle. But actually they don't know that. They're just like, well, we can't do that because we haven't got that. Well, actually, if you knew that, you could probably provide the needle. That probably isn't that much money to enable that factory to then start to sew with different yarns. So I think it's, and I think as you're on it, it's getting down to those granular details to figure out how you then make that big impact. And there's loads of these granular details. And as you know, when you get down to that factory base, we kind of need to put a bit more money back down the supply chain to help invest in enabling them as a factory to start to do things differently. You know, they want to do it. The money's just not in their pocket.
With that in mind, then, Helena, how much does collaboration and competition collide then within the industries, and how can that be overcome?
Collaboration is key, and just asking those questions and working really closely with the factories. And actually, I think with the pandemic over the last year and a half, people haven't been able to go out to those factories and work with those factories. And I think, you know, there might have a lot of those factories are not in a great shape either. Maybe, you know, they've produced products and it hasn't been paid for, it hasn't been shipped. You know, the factory base does need us to collaborate with them a lot more. I think it's key to that whole transformation.
How do you overcome that with your suppliers? Do you find that to start with? And is it something? How do you overcome that? You're on mute, Rosie.
No, I realise. So the question: collaboration between retailers or within the supply chain, or both?
I am now within the supply chain, please.
Within the supply chain. So yeah, I think it's about understanding kind of which your strategic suppliers are and trying to do some innovation there, because I think that's where we can kind of dedicate most time, most resources. So an example of what we're doing at the moment on cotton products actually is working with Cotton Connect, one of our strategic suppliers in Pakistan. And kind of the idea of that is that we work with 2,500 farmers. We train them in more sustainable production techniques, and then that feeds directly through into our product. It means we can give our customers traceability of their cotton, which is obviously a key priority at the moment. It means that we can kind of work with our suppliers to say we're definitely going to be purchasing this amount of cotton from you, these cotton products from you. So we are working very much in kind of a three-way partnership on it. So I guess it's looking for opportunities like that kind of works well within supply chains.
Thanks, Rosie. Simon, how do you see this question?
I think it's very it's very, very tricky because you've got different, at the end of retail, you have got everything from the kind of the likes of fast fashion to more distinguished items, sort of more valuable items as well. You know, you've got designer goods as well. So the whole thing is so complex. And whether or not with the designer items and designer brands, it's a different process to what fast fashion does. I don't know. Rosie might be able to sort of help me on that one. It's a long process, and I think what I said before is it's a long journey. You know, it's about identifying things now and working on them and putting them in place. You know, for example, with WRAP 2030, what's going on within there, and that is, you know, there's another 8 years to be able to achieve this. So we have got a long way to be able to do it. But as you've said, Helena, you know, even if it's something as simple as a needle, you identify it now and then you put that in place. And if you're working on different cottons and everything else, things like that, they're going to change. You know, it's going to change over the coming years. We've gone from an industry that produces a phenomenal amount of heavy waste, just because, one, probably the technologies aren't there. Two, we're developing different yarns, cottons, sustainabilities. And three, I'm fairly certain that the price point is going to be changing over the years because it will have to. But for certain periods of time, we've been able to get away with a lot lower price points on clothing, whether it be the Boohoo's or various of the different businesses along the way. But then we just sort of go, okay, guys, we've done this for so long. What's in the 2025 goal? We should have got the bigger needles, as it were, and we've got the different cotton. Let's make the difference and actually, by 2027, make sure that the changes are really, really in place.
Thanks, Simon. Rose, did you? Sorry, Helena, go on.
It's so interesting because people look at a high fashion brand and they think that they're producing differently to a fast fashion brand. Those high fashion brands are fashion brands. They produce in exactly the same way. They just charge more money for it. So actually, there isn't that difference. We think there's a perceived difference, but actually there isn't. So they're just as, you know, they're just as accountable to a Boho, to a Primark, to an Asda, to a Tesco's. They're all in the same space, and if anything, because they are high fashion brands, they demand more churn. So actually, there's a lot more waste. So I think we've got this perception of things, but actually, when you kind of open up the lid, it's kind of all the same.
Is it?
Yeah. I don't know whether you agree with me there.
No, I'm very pleased you said that, because I think
I think it is. I think it is a perception.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you see from the likes of the Textiles 2030 partnership is that everybody's facing the same challenges. Essentially. Yeah, 100%. There was one other example of kind of working in the supply chain that I did want to share, actually, and it's because you started talking about waste. So it's waste at factory level, and so one of the ways we are trying to help our suppliers is we've got a pilot going on in Leicester at the moment, where we're working with a waste management company to collect the textile waste. It means we can analyze how much textile is being wasted during the production process, and we're trying to put in place a kind of sorting and assessment process whereby, like, the larger offcuts are sent to a third party to be reused, the smaller offcuts are going into kind of what do you call it, insulation and things like that, and we're just trying to avoid anything going to kind of to landfill, ideally, and incineration. So we're doing a bit of a pilot at the moment to see how it works and how we can kind of improve the collection process, and then hopefully we'll be able to start rolling that out.
There's an amazing company called Life Cycle that are based up near you, actually, that do that very thing. So I'll have to connect you to them.
Thank you.
Great, guys, really interesting. I must say, I do like the term distinguished item. I think I'm going to pinch that off you, Simon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Simon, when it comes down to it, are consumers really all that bothered about where their goods come from, and you know, or is it still, for the majority of people, down to what they pay for stuff?
I think it's changing by generation at the moment. I think the younger generations, I suppose Generation Z, as you would class it, I think they're becoming a lot bothered about the products from the perspective of what it's made from, etc. That for me is probably a key thing that I think everyone else will probably agree with. It will always be on price, I think, to a certain degree, but that's everyone's kind of, what do you want to pay for the items? It's individual more than anything. But I think younger generations have got it nailed on. Older generations are coming round to it, I would say, because like anything, we've done it a certain way for a long period of time, and we're kind of used to it. Whereas the kids, as it were, have gone, right, okay, this is really important. This is really important. I should be doing this. I should be sort of shopping more sustainability with more sustainability. We're using a lot more second-hand items. That's massively key as well at the moment. So I think we're probably in very good hands, to be honest, for the generations coming up.
And I guess is this what you're finding?
Sorry, I lost you for a minute.
Oh, sorry.
I get the crux of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Your customers are of that generation, that younger generation that Simon talked about, obviously, and
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we've got a whole range of customers actually, but especially with the new brands that we've brought in. But we have done quite a lot of customer research in developing our strategy and kind of beyond. So we did some focus groups with kind of 20 to 24-year-olds in the US and the UK, and then with a slightly older group as well. And then earlier, about a month or two ago, we did a survey with all of our customers, and we got about 15,000 different responses. And interestingly, the feedback was quite consistent across everybody, irrespective of age, which is quite surprising to me. And a couple of things that kind of stood out for me were that just because something is kind of not less expensive doesn't mean people throw it away quicker, because it really depends on the level of disposable income you have as a shopper. So I think that's quite an important myth to kind of to consider or delve into a little bit more, especially. And then in terms of kind of what customers really care about, they still care about price, they still care about quality, but sustainability is increasingly important. And interestingly, packaging as well is a very iconic part of a product and very kind of front of mind for customers as well. But yeah, we are also, to what Simon said, we're certainly seeing people interested in kind of secondhand market as well. So you see kind of a lot of the trends you would expect kind of coming through from the formal research.
Thank you. There's a question from Rebecca. We have cotton waste, she says, but because it is not in a textile, nobody will touch it. Do you think things like this will start to change? Who wants to take that one? Helena?
Can you say the question again? I didn't quite understand it.
I think he's saying Rebecca has cotton waste, but because it's not in a textile, nobody will want to touch it. Will this kind of thing change?
Yeah, I mean, waste is money, isn't it? If you cut out waste, you're cutting out costs. So I think a lot more businesses are looking at how they can start to bring that waste back into production again, how they sell that on to somebody to make stuff. So I think the future is, especially when you want to start doing things more sustainably, because those new materials are a little bit more expensive, but actually people are looking at how they can make cost savings within their business, and waste equals money back.
Yeah. Can I just say there's places like Future Fashion Factory? So there's Huddersfield, Leeds and Royal College who are looking at a lot of solutions like this, are looking at what to do with different textiles and what they can do with them. So a lot of the universities, and we've worked with Huddersfield, are really on top of this. Some of the lecturers are really doing great things on what they can do going forward with it.
We're coming up to the last few minutes of the session. I wanted to ask you, apart from Boohoo, which company or brand really stands out for you as driving forward sustainable supply chains at the moment? Helena?
So there's a couple that are kind of doing it in the background. So Georgia Asda have been on a journey for about 18 months, and they definitely believe that sustainability shouldn't just be for people that can afford it. that they feel it's actually their duty to make sustainable product, and that's just the product that you buy from the shop, so that there shouldn't be a difference in price. So 100% of their school uniforms are all sustainably sourced. They haven't jumped up and down about it. And 76% of all of their George clothing is sustainably sourced as well. Again, they haven't jumped up and down about it. They just feel it's their duty to do that. And they're, you know, as everybody's on a journey to do things differently. And there's just loads. They've just launched their first ESG report as George, and it's quite amazing when you go and you look at the progress that they're making. Tesco's are doing the same. People at IKEA are doing some amazing stuff when they're looking at how they can bring back products back into the loop and have a resale, you know, for old furniture. H&M are doing similar things. So, you know, these are mass companies that produce cheap mass products, but actually they're looking at how they build different business models into their current business to enable them to be more sustainable for the future. So they're gearing themselves up for us to change our consumer behaviour. Quite fascinating.
Yeah, Rosie, who's impressed you?
So I quite like kind of some of the slightly smaller brands that are doing some quite cool stuff. So there's one company who I've known for quite a long time actually, called Elvis and Cressy, who do some great stuff with. They use old fire hoses and made luxury bags and stuff like that from it. So it's really cool, very quite niche, but quite impressive stuff, and obviously completely tackling waste in terms of their progress. You know, you've got Finisterre who are doing some great stuff on more sustainable materials, and you've got the likes of Patagonia, who is talked about quite regularly. And then just this week, and it's less about communicating about supply chains, but more about just, you know, talking about honest communication, is that Garni did some quite interesting comms this week about calling out that they're not sustainable, but they are kind of working towards it and demonstrating what they have actually done. So lots of interesting stuff out there. I wouldn't say there was one kind of standout organisation.
Simon?
I think for me, Allbirds, I really like what they're doing with the footwear. You know, really good. I also like their labelling, not that I'm into labelling, but the label tells you how much CO2 has gone into it, and I think that's a great idea. And I think I might get the name wrong, but I think it's Vibram, which is the really thin footwear, where they were messing around with algae and things like that. Is that correct, Helene? I'm not sure if it's Vibram. But yeah, there was algae in different kind of materials. So they weren't going near rubbers or anything. They were just looking at how they can concoct this specific undersole out of plant-based materials. Yeah. Phenomenally clever. And again, Patagonia, who seem to be absolutely right at the front of it. And then for me, as an organization themselves, Surfdome. So Surfdome are completely on top of it. The factories use rainwater and everything else. Just really good business, and ethically as a business what they do. So, you know, they do the beach clean and everything else. They're really strong, and for me, quite a leading business within the outdoor sort of retail industry.
There's some amazing innovation happening in materials, like you say, with the algae bloom, and so many water treatment plants are now investing in that, because suddenly you've got a water treatment plant that actually is a service that can now become a business because they can grow this algae that goes into a vulcanized train. It's amazing. And even down to silk that can be made from milk. So all of and new nettle fibers. So it's amazing that what is kind of seen as probably obviously quite an expensive, not an everyday consumer good today, when you look to the future, that might be our norm. It's bonkers.
Well, that leads us on to my last question, really. I think I know your answer here, but is the genie out of the bottle now as far as sustainability in the supply chain is concerned? And to use a sort of word of the moment, is what you're doing now completely irreversible, Rosie?
Yeah, I mean, the research that we've done with customers, I think the expectation is that businesses need to sort it out. So it's our responsibility to make sure that our supply chains are transparent, and we're driving improvements in there. And again, yeah, I think when you look at kind of customer trends, investor trends, and legislation, yeah, 100%. This is kind of, we're going to just keep improving essentially.
I think from a customer expectation, yes, it is completely out of the bottle. We're expecting businesses to be completely transparent. From a business perspective, no, I don't think it is yet, because I think it will take a long time to do that. Because, you know, like you said, with all the supply chains, they are phenomenal things with hundreds of thousands of people involved that will take time for it to all come out, and it will take time for changes to happen. But certainly the expectations and certainly the demand from consumers is there. I think everyone will just catch up.
And finally, Helena.
Yeah, I echo what you all say. So there was a latest McKinsey study that said that 86% of consumers say it's up to businesses to produce more sustainable products, and that's what that, you know, it's not up to them to necessarily choose that sustainable product. It should just be how they produce.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at the 2030 and the 2050 goals that we've got to hit our, you know, the science-based targets, we've got 9 years. And when you look at business and how long it takes to implement change within business, actually 9 years is just around the corner, really. So we've got to put the foot on the pedal to kind of move things quickly, and it's hard to move it's hard to move a massive corporation to transform an industry, and it's hard work. I mean, we transformed stuff due to COVID, but you know, government was willing to help and pay and invest, and you know, I think it's going to be a tough road ahead, but it's just something that we just have to do.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, we've run out of time just about. Thank you to our audience for watching today, but mostly thank you to Rosie, Simon and Helena. Fascinating insights. Please make sure you do stick around, visit the expo, part of today's event in between the sessions, and tune in for the next session, which is coming up pretty soon, which is called Using Innovation to Drive Sustainability in Manufacturing. But again, thank you to our panel, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.